Hey, Queens, have you ever thought about moving in with a guy, moving in with your boyfriend? Well, most people in my channel and in my coaching practice, we don't do boyfriends. However, I do want to talk about moving together before you are married and why this is major cool girl syndrome, major problems. So there's been a lot of studies done about this. You can Google them. You can type cohabitation before marriage, inertia relationships. So today we'll talk about that, inertia relationships. And I'll talk a little bit about intentional marriage, right? So we'll also talk about relationships of convenience. Because a lot of times people think that a relationship of convenience is like you being a gold digger or like you scamming the guy. But like this, moving in with a guy can also be something like that. So let's talk first about the scenario of a relationship of convenience. So this is most common in people that are young, in people that are in their early 20s or in their 20s or even teenagers, where, so if you're very young, it'll be like, oh, I'm so like happy not to be living with my parents. So now I can share expenses with my boyfriend and live with him. That's one scenario. Another scenario is where you probably live in a big city like New York, LA, Chicago, London, and you might be young or in your 30s. And a huge reason of why you think it's a great idea, like within you, like deep inside of you, you didn't say this to anyone. So a reason why you're wanting to do that is because if you live alone as a woman, you're like, oh my God, you know, I'm not going to have to pay my whole rent or my whole mortgage by myself. So how perfect, how convenient it is to move in together. Okay. So when you see it as a huge kind of advantage to you to have the guy pay either part of your expenses or even all of them. Okay, so a relationship of convenience is not a relationship with intention. I guess you do have the intention of getting some bills paid, right? But in the long run, where do you think it's going to be? So the studies that have been made in regards to living together before marriage, a couple of them say that 50% of the couples that live together before marriage end up in divorce. And there was a study that said that 80% plus of these couples and are more likely to end up in divorce. And why is that? Because moving in out of convenience or inertia, which I'll talk about in a minute, it's not gonna cut it for when things get rough. After the honeymoon period, after like a year or two that you've been with someone, once the hormones have worn off, once all of that chemistry is down and you all came to your senses, things can get rough if your relationship didn't have a proper foundation, which I'll talk about further along. So once shit hits, like reality hits and shit starts to hit the fan, these couples that started from convenience or from inertia are way more likely to end up in divorce. So there's no actual intentionality when it comes to the union itself. There's no actual commitment. Okay? So just before I forget, I was listening to this coach. He is a male coach in the United Kingdom, or he has an accent from somewhere in the United Kingdom. He has like 2.6 million followers on YouTube. And someone on his podcast called him to ask, should I move in with my boyfriend? Is it too soon? And you know what he said? He said how, oh my God. I was like, oh my God, this guy, man. It's the feminine energy men out there. I'm telling you, fuck. But anyway, so he says, you don't want to put the pressure of forever on you guys. You need a trial run. You need to go in, with less risk. He's like, because men, how men can get really like scared of, full-on commitment that is full-blown. And I'm telling you, this is a really famous dating coach. And I'm like, whoa. And what he's saying in a nutshell, what he's saying in other words, he's saying, this man doesn't really see, because he's like, just rent an apartment and you can just casually like, move in together and then see where things go. Because, the men, they kind of freak out about like the forever word and all that. So for starters, why the fuck would you be going out with some guy that is scared of marriage or like full-on commitment? So like, why would you go out with a guy that is not even a viable candidate, for starters, right? But then what he's saying in a few words is, he's saying, so allow this man to use you, to fuck you, to try you out, see what he, so that he can see what you're like, see if you're worthy enough for him, right? Allow him to use you for a couple years until he can make up his mind, and maybe you can try to convince him to marry you. Like, this is what this fucking guy is saying. This is a famous coach, with 2.6 million viewers in YouTube, just for you to know that, or realize that here in our channel, we truly are the freaking 1% that is not doing what the mainstream is doing. Like the 2.6 million people worshiping that kind of narrative where women allow men to use them and stuff, right? So let's go back to the main topic. Let's talk about inertia relationships. So what happens then? So you meet a guy and he's like, yeah, I've talked about this scenario a lot of times in my channel, but if you're new to the channel, there's a scenario where the guy is like crazy about you when he meets you. And by crazy, I don't mean like crazy lust. I'm talking about like he is smitten by you. You're the one for him. He wants to marry you very soon after he meets you. He's crazy about you. And the other scenario is where, you guys met and he's like, yeah, she's nice. She's hot. Let's see where things go. She's, let's see where things go. What he's saying is he's not seeing you as wife material, but let's see where things go. So immediately he's not that into you, but he's open to seeing where things go. Okay? So anyway, you meet this guy and you guys are dating and you become his girlfriend for a year or two. And then, you start to spend a lot of time in his place. You start to leave all your things in his house, little thing by little thing. And you spend so much time in each other's place that it just makes sense. It just makes sense to move in together. It's the logical next step, right? Do you know what inertia means? Inertia in physics is, when a ball is rolling, when it rolls down, continues to move forward by its gravity, by its weight, that's inertia. It's like a kind of like a consequence type thing, right? So you basically end up pretty much living in each other's house. And one day you're like, oh, well, maybe it makes sense that we just have one place instead of two, right? It makes more sense. And we have such a good time together anyways. So it just makes sense. And the woman, a lot of times, she really and truly never wanted to do that. She really and truly never really saw herself doing that. She was more hoping or wanting to move in with someone once married. But it is the ultimate cool girl syndrome thing, because you're doing it because, it makes sense, because everyone does it. Everyone does it. So, it's part of the culture. So that's what I do. I follow what everyone else does. And I say yes, even though I don't really want to. The women that actually want to actually do this before marriage, let's talk about her. Let's talk about the risk aversion. What I'm talking about here is the lack of commitment, the fear of commitment. So you and him, when you're coming in wanting to trial run each other with less risk, we'll talk about the risk in a minute. You are with 1 foot in and 1 foot out. if you start to not like things, if things go awry, then it's mess free, right? It's easier. Well, let me tell you something. The inner work that is meant to happen within a couple is to happen within a safe container. A union and a container where the woman and even the man feel safe enough to bring to surface the things and issues and stuff that will be the inner work that you do between the two of you after the honeymoon period. After the honeymoon period, there comes a lot of triggers. There comes a lot of issues and things to the surface because you all are thinking straight by them, right? So without the safe container of it, guess what happens? That's when divorces happen within the first and second year, right? Why? Because if you enter a union without intention, I'll make a separate video about traditional marriage and divine union, which is intentional marriage, divine union. I'll tell you why, because there was someone in the comments that went off on a rant or tangent saying how marriage is not the guarantee for happiness and success. This woman is totally confused about this, but I'm gonna make a separate video about that. Okay? So you are living together and now things are getting weird at the 2 year. And then because you had one foot in, one foot out, the inner work that needs to happen, it will not happen because the commitment is simply not there. And you will end up separating in the end. But let's say things continue to move forward. So women, they typically hope and think that moving in together, just like being a girlfriend, is a step towards marriage, like moving forward in their relationship. Let me break it to you. It's not. Moving in together is not, an actual step forward. It is convenience. It is inertia. Okay? So what happens then? Say things do move forward and it's like, well, we've been living together for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Now, I guess it makes sense to get married. It makes sense. And again, these are the types of relationships that end up in divorce, inertia relationships, according to science, according to scientific studies, right? And I've talked about this example that always comes to my mind. Well, there's plenty of them. But I talked about the little story about Alex and Sandra, how, like them, so many couples, right? He only proposed to her after like freaking 6 years or 7. Then by the year 8 together, they ended up divorced because he ended up seeing someone else, whatever. So, yeah. And you're like, well, isn't that common? Yeah. So let's talk quickly the contrast of inertia relationships versus intentional relationships. Say you guys meet and he really is crazy about you. And I'm not saying he has all this chemistry and lust for you. He really sees you as a one. And he wants to marry you. So very soon after meeting, he proposes and you marry within some time, some months, whatever. And you are the love of his life. And to you guys, marriage and divine union is a huge deal. And you both are all in. Okay? And this is the whole point of this. Tell me what thing in life ever worked out when you were half-assing it, when you were half in. For business, for school, for this, for that, like for anything that really mattered in life, tell me whatever worked out when you were not all in. Full-blown commitment. Yeah? So when you're with a guy that is like, you know what, I am all in with my heart, with my spirit, with my body, soul, with my money, with my net worth, with my equity, I'm here to provide and protect you. I am all in. I want to marry you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. This type of intention on his end and your end is a completely different ballgame. Completely different. And I personally don't know any couples that married with this intention, the intention of divine union, that ended up in divorce. I don't know any of them where it truly was a proper start and then it really deteriorates. Well, something must have changed. You must have changed. What changed there? I don't really know any of these. There was someone in the comments saying, oh, you know, my husband was crazy about me when he met me and all of that. And now 3 years down the road, it's not the same. Okay. So past the honeymoon, like I have videos about this, right? Like polarity past the honeymoon, all of that. And this is my life work, right? This is what I do here in my coaching practice, right? Right? What happens when there's no polarity, when you didn't come in your feminine energy and you're in masculine, blah, blah, blah. Right? So anyway, the question is, do you want to be in a divine union where you're all in? He is all in and he sees himself forever with you. And that's what he wants. And that's what you both want and are coming in with all this intention, with the correct polarity, right? Do you want that? Or do you want like, you know what? I'll be there with 1 foot in, 1 foot out. You're going to run away at the first issue and I might do the same. And he's going to go cheat at the first issue and you might do I don't know what. And, you know, we'll see where things go. And ladies and gentlemen, we have the modern dating and relationship fucking disaster. So yeah, stay tuned for the video on intentional marriage, divine union versus traditional marriage. I'll talk about that in another video. And of course, I talk about this in my courtship for marriage course in much greater detail. So that's it for now, guys. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye now.